Hello and welcome back, everyone. You may have seen during the breaks that there are some amazing jobs going on the FITC job page. We post a bunch of super interesting jobs regularly, many which allow you to go hybrid or full remote. So why not take a look, and you can check it out at www.fitc.ca/jobs. Also, please note we are going to be taking an extended break right after this session. So if you're hungry, want to grab something to eat, go on a little walk, and we'll be back. I'm sorry, then we'll have that longer extended session after this panel discussion. Now, I am really excited for this panel discussion because I love anything that is run by this speaker. Here to present a panel discussion on building effective UX teams is David Hogue. David is an applied psychologist and an interaction designer. He's been a UX design lead at Google since 2013, and he's been teaching information design, interaction design, and mobile design courses at San Francisco State University. Please welcome David Hogue, everyone. Send your clap emojis in the chat, please. Welcome.
Thank you, Elise. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Spotlight UX. It's nice to be back. Nice to see everyone virtually again. Today, we've invited a talented group of UX leaders, and they've collectively built UX teams in many different types of companies, and they're going to be sharing their experiences about what they've learned about what makes an effective team and how to build cohesive teams. After our conversation, as always, we'll have a few minutes for questions from the audience, so please add them to the Q&A throughout the session. If a question enters your mind, add it up. We'll take a look at those at the end. So today we're going to be discussing building, supporting, and growing effective UX teams, including the skills and abilities that we balance, how to create opportunities for growth, how we help team members support each other and increase their abilities, lots of different topics to cover here. All of our panelists have very interesting perspectives and deep experience with team building. So let's welcome, first we've got Sarah Hunt. She joins us today from the San Francisco Bay Area. She's a director of UX for PayPal's core checkout and merchant services products. With 15 years experience, she has been a designer, a product manager, and a leader who has built and led teams at PayPal, Adobe, and Envision. Originally from Toronto, and a shout out to the FITC headquarters there, she's now a presence both in the Bay Area and global tech communities, and has amassed more than 1.3 million, yes, million followers on TikTok for her imaginative and creative 3D printing projects. She's also really good with programming, wiring, circuitry, and LEDs, and has been known to completely rebuild, if I remember correctly, a very well-worn Dance Dance Revolution machine. Patrick Neiman is opinionated about everything. He may often be found in Seattle and is probably most well known as the inventor of the UX drinking game and owner of the Usability Counts blog. He's held several director and senior director of product design roles at high growth companies, and he's currently the vice president of user experience at Evisort, where he continues to build cross-functional and multidisciplinary teams. Like Sarah, he's also worn a product manager's hat and has worked across a wide range of digital companies. In his spare time, he tweets about whiskey and teases gin drinkers. Josh Malden is joining us from Los Angeles, down in sunny Southern California. He's a vice president and design evangelist at Artium. He and his team help companies of all sizes by facilitating workshops to help them identify the right product or market fit, how to collaborate more effectively, how to build psychological safety, and how to build incredible design teams. He's also a visual artist, loves music, and like many design leaders, he still likes to be hands-on and practice his craft. He's currently writing a book, We Need to Talk, How to Have Hard Conversations with Everyone. It'll be published next year by Rosenfeld Media. He's never met a dog he doesn't want to pet, and he doesn't care if he gets hair all over his favorite clothes. So welcome, everyone. We're looking forward to the conversation today. I'm going to start off, which is actually kind of a carryover from a topic that we had in our previous panel several months ago, where we were talking about remote work. And Sarah, I'm going to ask you about this one because I know PayPal is a large organization with a global presence. Yeah. Remote work has become an expectation for many people during the pandemic. And when it comes to building a team in a remote or hybrid environment that we now find ourselves in, has this actually helped us find more talented people for our teams? And how do we build a team when people are distributed? How do we make that a cohesive team?
So, so I'm going to answer this especially from the point of view of working on a payments platform. So at PayPal, what we've done is that we have expanded our hiring policy where it is global and it is international. So you don't necessarily need to be in a tech hub to be considered for employment. I think what this has introduced and what I'm seeing, especially over the past year since we implemented this policy, and actually seeing some of the results of those hiring practices, is that we get a lot more diverse opinions that become implemented into our products. Because when you think about PayPal, or when you think about payments in general, it is a tech product that is used for facilitating an exchange of money. And when you're localized in the Bay Area, we're around here, it tends to be like we have the latest tech, we all have the latest gadgets, we have the latest ways of doing things. But since we've been able to open up our hiring to be able to include more diverse perspectives, we'll have designers that are just completely like, they're like, you guys seem so out of touch with the way everyone I know uses payments or uses technology. So I think it's been really positive from that perspective in being able to allow those points of view to influence our products. Another thing that I found really positive is that it allows for more work-life balance for people that might not otherwise be able to take advantage of an in-office environment or maybe had a problem with that. From what I've seen, especially people with families, right? Like if you have a family and you're thinking a lot about work-life balance, and you want to prioritize being at home. I mean, I do. I have a 4-year-old. I have a 4-year-old daughter. I love being at home with her, and so I think it's allowed for more flexibility and retention in some cases of designers who maybe otherwise would have turned out. I've heard a few stories from employees, or actually seen this happen across the board too, just not in design, that people are like, hey, I'm going to go live this RV life, or I don't want to be tied down to a specific location. So I'm going to look for employment opportunities where I have more flexibility in my living situation.
Right, right, right. I know personally that I am now interviewing people from many places where I would not have previously been able to do that. And because the expectation would have been you have to move to be near an office.
Right.
And now it's like, no, you can actually work from there and it's okay. So it's such a broader range of people that we are now being exposed to just through the interview process, let alone who we're hiring and how we're, sort of letting our companies represent so many different regions, as you said. I want to come back to the other part of this question, though. What are the challenges around creating a cohesive team when people are not physically present? It's great that we have this range of experience and talented people from elsewhere, but we now have a new set of challenges, and that is it's a little harder to get to know people.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say probably the two that come to mind. One are time zones, and making sure that you can facilitate an environment where people are prioritizing, setting meetings and collaborations and times to connect in friendly time zones across the board. That can be difficult, even, working on the Pacific or East Coast. If someone sets a meeting for 9 a.m., well, that might be 6 a.m. for someone and they just can't attend. And it does become a little bit more challenging when you're working in, say, like a 10-hour time zone difference. I still don't have a perfect formula for how to manage that. It's just something we got to try our best with. I would say the other, directly from the point of view as a people manager, is you lose some of that ability to kind of intuit what's going on with your team. So everyone has lives, right? Like people have things that are going on at home. They have good things, they have bad things that are going on. And one of the things I hold myself accountable for as a leader is, making sure that my team is okay. Because and especially what I've learned over the pandemic is that people don't like to ask for help. It's been difficult to get people to do things like take vacations and actually take the time off that they need, and that can lead to burnout. I've seen that happen a few times. And so I think it does increase the responsibility of people managers to make sure that you find ways to connect with your team, even if you don't directly manage them, other people that you work with. You doing regular check-ins and you doing the provocation and you creating that space for people to be open with you and not just sit back and wait for them to come to you. Because if you just sit back, they're not going to come to you, and then they might, they might quit, right? Or, something else ends up happening. So you just need to be a lot more proactive in making sure that you develop those connections.
Right, right. So Sarah, you touched on two kind of separate areas there. One around the people management of distributed teams and how easy, tempting sometimes it is to get into the habit of, I don't have a commute anymore. I can use all of my waking hours for work, right? Or getting trapped into working all the time. And then some of the challenges, like even just dealing with time zones and sharing information and communicating. I'm gonna point at Josh for a moment because I know communication is a big thing for you, and whether or not the conversations are difficult, but communication is essential for effective teams. And in your experience, how do we help team members communicate more clearly when some are present and some are remote?
There are loads of ways we can approach this. One is around setting up rituals and expectations for how we communicate with one another. So if we're doing a design critique, for example, we want to make sure that everything that we talk about is well scoped. So, hey, I'm looking for feedback on how this flow works for checkout. And it really helps everyone stay on task, stay focused. But there's something else that you're touching on around, like, how are we making sure that people are communicating clearly in addition to scoping your feedback. I think part of it is just having this element of safety where we can hold space for one another to talk about things that are going on in our lives. How people de-stress with everything that's going on around them, it's really different based on the person. What looks like relaxation for one person, as in like, hey, I'm getting out for the day to go take care of myself, could be antithetical to what someone who really loves to immerse themselves in their work. So there's a whole lot to unpack with that, but I will just say, like, the more you can normalize holding space for other people, the more you can be very clear about what you're looking for and your expectations. Those are the things that really help us communicate more effectively.
Do you find that people also, I mean, in my experience, people have preferences for the channel or form of communication. There are email people, there are chat people, there's meeting people, there's comment threads in documents people. When you've got this much variability on a team, just the place where we communicate has become scattered, right? We now have conversations that happen in so many channels. And how do we help a team? You talked about setting boundaries and having reliable systems and understandable systems. How do we establish that for a team?
I think a lot of that is on the leadership. I want people to communicate in ways that feel best for them, but we will always have certain places where information will be communicated. We have, I think of the word escalation, where it's just like, we know where we want to talk when something is official. But there's this fine balance that we're trying to achieve of, okay, so you're an email person, or you like to like Slack people in the middle of the night. You want to set expectations around, like, hey, if I'm happening to send you something over the weekend and you may see that notification, I may preface it by saying, please don't think about this until Monday. I'm just trying to get it out of my head. But there's also this other element of, like, depending on how other people like to communicate, you tend to lose a bit of fidelity of your message and communication, because when we're not seeing each other in person, when we're not seeing each other on video, we tend to lose some of those nuances of communication, like body language. So we have to compensate for that, because we'll find that our brains love to fill in those gaps with negative information. So that may mean a little bit more clarity around what you're saying, maybe a couple of emoji, and that can really help get across these differences in how everyone prefers to communicate.
Right, right. So this is actually like the second or third time now a topic of like well-being has arisen, and I'm not surprised. You know, we talk about when we are distributed, it is entirely possible that the people I work with in London send a regular email that comes to me in the middle of the night. And there's no expectation for me to respond to it at that point. But being able to manage these channels, helping people remember that there are boundaries between work and life. And when you're at home, those boundaries can be really blurry. So let's talk a little bit about how we plan for our team's allocation, what they are working on, and how much time they should be working. I'm going to toss this over to Patrick. As managers, we're often responsible for making sure that people are allocated to projects and that they're allocated in a very balanced way, and that we're making sure that we're not expecting too much of people, yet we still have deadlines and requirements that we have to meet. When people are at risk of overworking because they're at home all the time, or because communications are coming in at all hours and they get reminders and notifications and stuff like that, how do we handle things like what some teams will call bench or buffer? How much time should we allow for people to not be doing their productive work? The time that is necessary for commuting or not commuting, or for just routine email and calendar management, or for the time that they need to just pause and think and let creativity happen. Do you have any suggestions for how we build that buffer into our team structures and our team allocations?
One of the models that I've seen in the past that works really well for me is actually looking at Agile or Scrum as a model. You know, I've been a product manager in the past, and one of the model that we use there is you would estimate the sprint, for example, like you have the next couple of weeks of what you were working on. And then the idea would be to only fill in 80% of the time, mainly because schedules are unpredictable, priorities change, you want to make sure there's thinking time, you want to make sure there's slack in the schedule for getting things done. And so what we look at from a resourcing perspective is 80% of your time should be pretty baked on what you're working on, and you should be setting the expectations of we need estimates, we need dates, you know, and then you're filling up the sprints. We don't, where I work at now, we don't work on a sprint model. We're more of a train model about how we design, but when we look at the week-to-week schedule, it's like 80% of the time should be there. And then I usually do with the team is saying 20% of the time could be however you want to use it. It could be looking at training materials, it could be doing research, it could be doing something else that's more productive, that's more about improving your skill set, or maybe filling in time where you want to play with an idea. And that model has always worked pretty well with me. And so what you have to do with the team at the very beginning is saying, you have to look at their schedule, you have to figure out the tasks, what they're doing, look at the tasks they shouldn't be doing. And you might even have to be a little bit what I call micromanaging at the very beginning of, you know, do we really need to be doing that? Or can we back on that? And then be very clear about setting expectations of what's delivered, and also clear about there's space for you to actually do your job, to do things outside of your job that aren't related to a sprint or to a feature, for example. And you should do that time to do other research so you can, for example, enhance your domain knowledge about what you're working on. And that model has always worked well for me in different teams. And it's been a little bit less of it depends. And we just do it because then it helps create space for the designer to do their job and do the research they need to do to improve their skill set.
Right, right. And I'll second, 80% has been sort of a target that I've considered that effective number for many years now also, because just 20% of your time is easily spent on email and calendar, right? Just keeping up with things that are happening around you, not even necessarily things that they may want to do for professional growth. They're just the nuisance operational things, right? Administrivia that happens around your work. I'm just going to toss this one generally out there. Sarah, Patrick, Josh, do you think your team members think that 100% work means 100% of my hours are done on productive product things? Or do you think they think about their time in a different way?
I'll start with this one. From what I've seen, generally, more of like the junior to mid level designers on my team will kind of have that mentality. And I think it takes maybe going through your career a little bit and developing a little bit of maturity about how you can be most effective as a designer to realize that's not the case. And one of the difficult things that I still have a hard time with in design is like, how do you quantify being creative? Like, time that it takes to think, time that it takes to kind of like sketch stuff out and explore. Like it can be difficult to quantify because you can't necessarily, put it cleanly in a box. We do attempt to do it with our team. I know what we do is that it's a sum of parts to try and make sure that we can at least allocate time for that space. Similarly, using that 80% model. But I'll be like, hey, let's just block off time on our calendars. Like, having 3 half-hour slots in the day isn't enough. Block off 3 hours in the afternoon. Block off the entire day on Friday. We have wellness days every few weeks where the company is just off, so you can. And I think that's especially important in design because and really in anything that involves strategic thinking, because like you need that time to be away so your subconscious self can work on your craft. But to answer your original point, I find it is something that as you mature as a designer, I feel like more recognize that like, no, it's not 100% of my time is spent, kind of heads down, but even when you are working through ideas, that's still being productive.
Right. Yeah, totally. Patrick or Josh, any additional comments on helping the team? Sarah just mentioned specifically putting time on people's calendars or telling them to mark time on their calendars where I'm not meeting at this time. This is heads down time, or this is reading time, or this is training time, and actually marking that the same way that they would mark any other meeting on their calendar. Any other ideas or things that y'all talk about with your teams?
Yeah, actually I do. Like one of the best features about Google Workspace is there's the notion of focus time, where basically if you block it off, you should be able to have time to do actual work and do the things you need to do that are outside of meetings, that are outside of collaboration, that involves playing around. And so in our company, we're getting to a model where once you mark focus time, you shouldn't be basically over scheduling that time with people. We're still having issues with that because of the time zones and everything, and we're still trying to collaborate. But a lot of the team members actually do a pretty good job of respecting that time and pinging on Slack, hey, can I book over this? I have to speak with you for a few minutes. That's actually really helpful. Another thing that's really helpful is actually changing the model of how designers think. A lot of designers think that 100% of their designs should actually go into a sprint, should actually be built. And I don't view design as a final deliverable. I view it as a way of alignment and learning. And some things should hit the cutting room floor. And so we're actually going through the process of getting to lower fidelity artifacts so we can talk about ideas and say, this is a good idea, this is a good idea, and provide that psychological space that there is no such thing as a bad idea. It's just there's a different approach that we have to do there. And just getting it out there for alignment and then moving on to other things once we learn that idea isn't something that we want to go with. And Josh, go ahead and chime in because you have some good comments around that.
So I want to poke at this notion of focus time for a moment and how we look at other people's calendars. Something I've tried to normalize is making sure that you realize that free time on someone's calendar doesn't mean they're available to work. And so I've normalized asking people before I put meetings on their calendar, hey, is this still a good time? Because I don't just want to pop things on people's calendars when they may have something else planned. And just being able to respect that time and everyone's creative process it's really helpful in doing that.
Yeah.
Can I add one more comment to that?
Yeah.
So that's a really good comment. A lot of times when people pop things on the calendar, there's almost this expectation you're setting. I need instantaneous answers for the context of this meeting. And for a lot of these meetings, there needs to be prep time. There needs to be refreshing of context because we're doing all that context switching. So there almost has to be that implicit ask of, I'm going to set up a meeting around this. This is what I want to talk about. Is there any materials that we need to bring to it? So that way we have a proper context, and that actually helps quite a bit.
Right, right. When a meeting magically pops onto my calendar that I'm unfamiliar with, one of the first things I do is I say, is there anything I should review before we meet so that I am prepared? Because if they haven't told me, I ask, and I use that opportunity to sort of help people understand that you should set expectations about what's going to happen in the meeting and what mindset they should be coming in with. And it makes it much more efficient use of time as well. Like if you schedule a 30-minute meeting and we spend 30 minutes talking about getting up to speed, but not the decision we need to make, then you have a follow-up meeting. And it's like, oh, that did not save any time at all, right?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go right on.
I was just going to say, are we going to have the like no agenda, no meeting conversation? Is that where this is going?
No, it's not. But I think it is related to that. Unless y'all think that it's really important for team building, we can set meeting etiquette as another topic, and we'll let some other panelists deal with that in the future. Now, one of the things that was mentioned by just about all of you is that need to be able to get into a state of flow, right? To get into the zone where you've got the time to focus, you've got the time to think, you've got time for creativity to happen. And you also talked about professional growth. And I think you mentioned burnout even, right? Like we just need to make sure that people are using their time effectively, because it really increases the risk of burnout. So there's focus and energy and creativity and risk of burnout. I'll start with Josh on this one. What are some of the things, as a person who likes music, likes visual design, who's writing a book on the side, and who is working full time, there's a lot of things that are happening in your life. But you've selected those things because they are your interests. They are your creative outlets. They are the things that energize you. What are some of the things we can do as a team that both help build the cohesion within the team, but also give people this opportunity to play, to be creative, to do things that are not necessarily work, to expose them to other things?
Yeah, so it's really interesting now that we're, still in the midst of a pandemic, and I don't really have the tools that I would normally have to like get people together to go check out an art museum or go to a screen printing workshop.
Right.
But there's still loads of things we can do, and one of them happens in one of like a team's regular ceremonies, like a design team hangout. Like we intentionally take time to talk about things that aren't related to the pixels that we move, the journey maps that we create, and those kinds of things. Like, what's good in design? Oh, hey, did you see like this other art installation is coming to the museum? And just having these conversations that kind of are tangential to our daily work, but these kind of things really feed the stuff that we do during our working hours. I think another way that we could sort of get at let's go to an art museum, but we're still all kind of virtual, is have folks who can come in and talk to you about their craft, like someone who's like a really talented metalsmith, or perhaps like someone who got really good at designing record packages. Like you never know how those things will connect with your brain and wire a few neurons together.
Right. What about, do you think that sometimes it feels forced for people, like especially because we have to do a lot of things remotely, both pandemic and with hybrid teams, to make everyone feel involved? We're just on a screen again, right? And we don't have that physical presence. We're not in the museum. We're looking at pictures on a screen. We're not in a kitchen taking a cooking class. We are maybe in our own kitchen looking at a screen, trying frantically to keep up with some professional chef who's teaching us how to make banana cream pie, right? They all sound fun, but they're different. And do you think it sometimes feels forced for teams, or do you think they generally appreciate these activities if we select them well, I suppose?
I definitely think selecting them well is really key in this. I've done a few workshops in the midst of deep screen fatigue. We were working on like creating like a little succulent garden, and it was very hands on. You got your
Yeah.
fingers in the dirt. It was really fun, but you want to make sure that folks can engage on the level that they want to, especially since we're remote. Like,
Yeah.
we've got families, we've got friends, we've got pets that we want to hang out with, and maybe we don't want to look at another screen. But the more you can merge doing things with your hands and making it easy and fun, that makes it really easy for people to be a part of this.
Okay. All right. I like that the specific addition there of if it is active, right? If you are somehow doing something as part of this activity, it is more engaging than if it is a passive observational, let's all watch a movie together activity kind of thing. All right. I want to come back to a topic that came up right at the very beginning, and I knew it was going to arise, and I want to make sure we've got time for it. Sarah, you had commented about being able to hire people who have different experiences, different perspectives, different opinions than perhaps we are normally exposed to in our sort of tech city bubbles in a handful of places around the world. And I think that's really, really related to things like diversity, equity, and inclusivity. That we have access to work with people with whom we may not have been able to work before, and who bring these different opinions and different experiences and different perspectives. And so this is going to be tossed out to the entire group here. This really is an opportunity for us to build far more inclusive and diverse teams, to get people of different experiences, ethnicities, religions, abilities onto our teams. Yet different companies have had very, very variable success with this. And most of the time, the success has still even been incremental. We don't see significant changes, positive but small, but not significant changes in things like diversity and inclusivity. Beyond what we consider the social necessity of being inclusive and equitable, you mentioned that having diverse teams is beneficial to the products. And I want to explore those two ideas. How do we take this moment to be more inclusive? And what is the value of inclusive teams when we think about the businesses? Like, what's the business proposition here? And why is this a good thing?
I can go ahead and start.
Yeah.
So I have a specific, well, probably a few specific examples, but I think a broader way that we've started to see this being implemented is by having more diversity in our teams, we're able to actually have people advocate for things that we might otherwise consider edge cases. So for example, like I'll use like sending money as an example, like everyone knows what PayPal is. You can use PayPal to send and receive money. And then there's the core use case like, hey, David, maybe I'm going to send you $20 and that's great. And then there's what might be considered maybe a secondary or tertiary use case, whereas I need to send money to people overseas. Well, we have what I've been hearing more stories from people as we've been hiring a bit more diversely about families that are, they're working at PayPal and like, hey, they're sending money to their families in Guatemala. They're sending monies to sending money to people overseas. Like I have my family in Canada that, every once in a while I'll like, give my sister a few $100 for a birthday present. But what we're able to do is actually amplify some of those pain points, because the thing with design is that like, from a technical perspective or an engineering perspective, oh, maybe something's an edge case and we're not necessarily going to prioritize it end to end as if it was our primary use case. But it's really up to all of us to think about what is the impact on the person for not giving this the attention that it needs. So I actually had a colleague tell a story where he has, I think I forget which country it was, but he was sending money to his family back home because they need money. And just the process of trying to use PayPal to send that money, it took a very long time. And then by the end of the day, he used the example, he was trying to send them $1,000, and then $250 later, that was all eaten up by fees, which is just absolutely ridiculous. And so by hearing stories from that internally, we're able to put a voice and a perspective on why this is important. Because we can all
Right.
speculate if we don't really know, and we can try and advocate for it if it's something that we believe in, but actually hearing about it from a more diverse perspective, it actually puts a face to that situation and helps give more empathy as to why this needs to be prioritized, because the human impact on 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 not doing this properly, I'm trying not to swear.
Right.
The impact of not doing this properly, like, it has a real effect on people. And the business impact is that over time, you start to lose equity in your brand. You start to lose trust in the people, because the thing is, these little edge cases, maybe they are an edge case, but if they are, even a power user of the rest of your product portfolio, now you've made a crack when they run into this experience that has caused erosion in that trust. And when you start to get those cracks, well, then people start to churn. They start to look for other products and services to use that makes them feel like, hey, this is actually something that I can relate to, or actually knows me a little bit better.
Right, right. So having people on our teams who experience our own products and use them in very different ways makes it much more real for the people, the other people who are working on that product. When it is more real, it feels more important, and it feels like it is something that we need to deal with. It's not an abstract thing of, oh, that's 1.5% of the user population. It's an analytics number. It's like, no, that's not an analytics number. That's Sarah, and she's sitting right there, and she just lost $250 in fees because our product did this, right? And it's much harder to ignore something like that. Patrick, your inclusivity and the value to the team and to the product.
For us, there's a very direct value to have worldwide understanding of contracts. And for example, I used to run a company as a product manager called escrow.com, and it was about consumer level escrow, selling of products across state lines, country lines. The fees conversation actually came up quite a bit. But one of the interesting things about the legal terms of escrow is that the word escrow does not actually appear in many languages. It is an abstract concept that is specific to legal terms within pretty much the English language. And so one of the things that we actually have to highlight within, because I work in a lot of domain specific things, is there's actually a requirements or specifications impact of understanding the nature of language in each of the different countries. For example, privacy laws in Germany are much different than privacy laws in France and everything. And so the designers have to bring that context of how will our product appear in that company or that country, and additionally, is it something that we can even build? Mm-hmm. And even represent as far as like a dashboard. And it's even further than just like, how does it affect them, but can we legally do it? For example, we deal a lot with contract cycle times, and the actual tying a cycle time to somebody in a company and their performance is something that you have to be very careful of in certain countries. And so you have to design the dashboard differently. And so there's a very specific feature impact that we have, that when we have very diverse teams, it helps us point out some of those nuances that we might not be aware of because we don't live in that country. We're not aware of those requirements, and it has a very material impact to the product.
Right. So not only do we get more diverse opinions and perspectives, we get a broader base of knowledge that is brought to the team.
Correct.
And it allows the team to catch potential mistakes or errors or omissions much more quickly, because we've got people who are looking at the products from a different angle. right? And it's not just an opinion. It is experience. It is knowledge about a place or something like that. And Josh, let's get you on this also, and the value of inclusivity to teams and products.
Sure. So I think the first thing I want to poke at really briefly is I love how we're humanizing edge cases. Edge cases are people. And like, it's really good to hear in this discussion that we're all talking about that. I think that when it comes to diversity in your teams, like we can't design well if we're only designing with people like us. And so it's certainly on leadership to go out to look in places where you typically don't look for candidates. You know, there are communities that aren't going to be open to you because of who you are. Like, I'm a white dude in tech. There are communities that aren't open to me, and that's fine. But it would be fabulous if we could get folks from other communities to come and work with us. So find more diverse job boards, write your job descriptions in a way that speaks to the impact that you can have, and less about, oh, you have 4 to 5 years of experience and you're a junior designer. Make it real and attainable, and let folks who are from different industries come in and work with you. I worked with an industrial designer who became a UX designer, and they were one of the most fabulous thinkers I've ever worked with. And the more we can do those kinds of things, the better our products will be considered, and the less harm ultimately we're going to be causing with our products.
Right. There's risk in homogeneity of our teams, training and background and perspectives. There is value in the heterogeneity, in the diversity of those experiences and of those perspectives. And we are unfortunately running out of time. This conversation and all of these topics could continue on and on. So I want to thank you all for sharing your perspectives. We have just over 10 minutes or so that we can go into Q&A with the audience. So let's welcome Élisée back, and we'll take a look at the audience Q&A, and we'll answer some questions from the virtual audience here.
Yes, thank you guys so much for this great discussion. We've got some questions here. One is from Samantha, which is, do you think it's hard for people to ask for help because they're afraid of looking weak somehow?
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you want me to take this one? I'm happy to take this one. Yeah, absolutely. And I will say it is something that, especially over the course of the pandemic, I've seen a lot more with our female employees, since we generally end up being the caregivers if we have a family at home. And so a lot of hesitation about saying like, hey, I need some time off, or, this does apply to everyone. Like, hey, I have a doctor's appointment, or I need to, spend some time with my family. I noticed especially during the first year, there was this kind of mentality that's like, oh, well, I'm at home, so I don't need to take time off, or I don't necessarily, like, I can figure my stuff out because I'm here at home. So it's something I've definitely noticed, and a little bit of what I talked about earlier is that it's kind of up to, it's up to your leadership team, it's up to your manager, and it's up to your work culture to create that space where you are creating opportunities for people to know that it's okay. Like, don't necessarily wait for people to come to you if something's wrong. Ask them, be proactive.
I have a little secondary question to that, which is like, do you feel like we have to explain what is happening, what we need help with? Or are you able to just, say, I need time off because there's something happening personal? Or how much do you actually communicate when you need help, or you need time, or you need what you need?
I know for me, I don't need a reason. If you tell me you need time off, like I trust you to get your work done. Like, I trust you when you're telling me that, hey, you need to take a break, you need to step away, and you have to tell me. I'll check in. I'll push a little bit just to like, just to see if you want to talk about it. Because sometimes people do want to talk about it, but they don't necessarily want to over impose. And so again, it's creating that space. I know for me, I don't need a reason. I trust you. I hired you. Like you're a great member of my team. Like you're a grown adult. You can take care of yourself. You don't need to tell me.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to chime in and say trust is absolutely critical there, right? And to say, I agree. I do the same thing Sarah does. You don't have to explain everything. If you say that you need something, I trust that you need something, and I will say, how can I help? Right? Is there anything that we can do to help? Is there anything I can do to help? And it's both that psychologically safe space. It's okay to say what you need to say. It's okay to be private, but to know that there is that opportunity and that there is that support there for the team. Yeah, Josh, you got a hand up.
Yeah. So I've got two things here. One, I think that on a policy level, it would be great if companies would just codify it and say, hey, we're giving you just these extra days off. You don't have to like put in for them. You don't have to say what's going on. A lot of times, if you can just put something on the table, that makes it a lot easier for someone to take something and use it, like extra days off or a more flexible schedule. And the second thing that I wanted to mention is when you're working with people, everyone has different needs. It's important to ask them what support looks like and then do what you can to do exactly that. Because everyone, again, we're all different people.
Mm-hmm.
I really like that that personalization that you're giving your team members. We have another question from Sean. How do you nurture a culture in a virtual team environment with a small team?
This is a great question because we didn't talk about team size, right? And I'm sure we have highly variable team sizes. PayPal, Google, large companies, potentially large teams. Patrick, you've often worked in smaller companies, and same thing for you, Josh. So let's, what size, first I would ask, what size is your team now, right? And like maybe what are your experiences with large versus small teams, or what you consider to be a small team?
Who do you want to call on first?
You spoke first, congrats.
Yeah, so right now I think my team is 9, I forget. I've been anywhere from 25 to 3, and every single situation when I figure out what works is basically pairing people up. I have competency leads of people that are experts in certain areas, for example. And so if somebody wants to learn about accessibility, they go to one of the resources I have now that they can go to him as an expert. And so I hire people that actually interlock like Legos, where they have different people with different skill sets. And then if there's another designer that needs to skill up in an area, I pair them together, then they can learn together, and there's a lot of scaffolding. Another thing that I do is I actually teach the team a lot of instructional design techniques. UX is not new; it's stealing from other fields. Scaffolding, basically, the I do, we do, you do format works pretty well, and we actually create that kind of culture where people can learn from each other. And so I pair designers up, even on a smaller team, so that way they can learn from each other.
I'm really big on pairing. The idea of scaffolding is a really good way of articulating it. But if you want to nurture someone's design or thinking chops, have your designers spend time with other designers, or have designers spend time with engineers or PMs. There's a whole host of things you can do to nurture your team outside of just this tiny window that we operate in. And secondarily, I think that there is a more cultural nurturing. Well, that was tough to say. You just want people to be able to bring themselves to work. I know that we hear that a lot. But really, it's doing your best to see all of your teammates as like other humans and understand how to interact with them. In that way, they become more comfortable sharing where they want to grow, what they might have some gaps in, and that can really help you nurture both the person and the teammate.
Sarah.
So right now my team size is 24 people in my organization. Actually, when I started at PayPal, my team was 2. Really, I'm trying to think of how to quantify it. Like with smaller teams, I find that I'm able to actually be on the ground and have a lot more context as to what we're working on. So it's like we're all moving together. Whereas with larger teams, I think that element of trust is amplified because I need to trust that, like, hey, you have all the context you need. If you don't, I need you to be telling me, hey, here's what you need from me. And so it's a different way of building the relationship, and it's a different way of communicating reciprocal needs within each other. I would say, though, I think a lot of the core principles are the same, just in terms of like checking in and focusing on career growth. We've talked a lot about like partnership with different team members, outside of the organization too, with like product and engineering, making sure that they're exposed to the right areas of the business and exposed to the right information they need to be successful. All of that, I feel like, is the same whether it's a small team or a large team.
Yeah, I think listening to all of your responses, I think we have a tendency sometimes to lean more toward the professional side of the relationships. And because all three of you actually commented at some point about sharing skills and sharing knowledge and connecting with people and personal growth and stuff like that. And I think we sometimes undervalue the social relationships that people form at work. Not that your coworkers all become your best friends, but humans are social. And the people that we work with, we have casual conversations with, and we end up learning something about. And I think part of the safe environment thing is also giving people the opportunity to share things about themselves or to hear stories and experiences from other people. I try to set an example. My teams have been like 2 to 50 in size. And one thing that I do regardless of the size is I will actually share stories about my own life and what I did over the weekend or my struggles with a particular plant in the garden. Just, it takes me like 90 seconds to say something at the beginning of a stand-up, and how much I'm disappointed that one side of my ceanothus in the front yard keeps dying. And it's like, I'm just putting it out there, right? And people don't have to respond. People don't have to be gardeners, but they know something about me as a person, not just as a manager or as a designer. And I think those opportunities to bring something of yourself and to feel safe in doing that, but without obligation, right? There are some people who have boundaries. They're like, home is home and work is work. And we can respect that. But people are able to talk about themselves more easily than just about anything else. And the opportunity to have those conversations socially is an important part of, I think, a cohesive team as well. Yeah. And do we have additional questions?
We do, but we are running a bit out of time now.
Okay. Yeah, that's true. We're down to almost. Yeah.
You guys did such a great job with your questions, and there's tons more questions in there. But unfortunately, yeah, we'll have to stop there. Sorry, guys.
No problem. All right. So unfortunately, yes, we are out of time. The remote fun for FITC does continue. There are many sessions yet to happen. So thanks again, Sarah, Patrick, and Josh. We really appreciate all the time that you spent with us. Have a great day, everyone. Enjoy the rest of FIT Spotlight UX, and hopefully we will see you again in the future.
Yes, thank you so much, David. Thank you so much for the panel, for the lovely Q&A, and thank you everyone for asking all these great questions, even though we couldn't get to all of them. They're very good.